Working? Oh, great. We're just waiting on a couple of speakers. We will get going in closer. We will get going in a couple of minutes. So if you just bear with us, and we will begin very soon. We should start, right? Right. I think we should probably get going because we have most of our speakers here. I think a couple are still to come, but we have a pretty exciting and busy agenda. So I'm here to welcome you. I'm the moderator for today's event. My name is Damien Fleming, and I am the Senior Director for Forests at WWF. And I have an amazing panel with me, which I will introduce shortly. But before I do, I just wanted to say how exciting it is. I arrived yesterday to be in a forest COP in the Amazon on Forest Day here at the WWF Pavilion, and with so much momentum already around forests. One of our, and to thank the Brazilian presidency for all of the efforts around the action agenda, one of the key things, the key asks for WWF coming into COP was to make sure that this is matched with some real formal political action around forests in COP. And that includes, of course, forest targets in NDCs, and also some of the discussions that we are hearing around a forest roadmap or a climate energy package, which would really leave a legacy on COP. COP28, going back 2 years, was really quite a historic moment for forests. It was the first time that forests were part of the official outcomes of a COP in the Global Stocktake in paragraphs 33 and 34. And in COP29, I was involved in a very similar event to this, where we built on the ambition of the Global Stocktake and did an analysis with Climate Focus, looking at the integration of forests in NDCs 2.0. And actually the news was pretty disappointing, that really despite unanimity of the role of forests in climate mitigation, climate adaptation, we were really seeing not a strong role of forests in NDCs. So a real call to action to governments in NDCs 3.0 to make sure that we really step up ambition and commitment on forests in those NDCs. So here we are now, a year on, we have this wonderful event, NDCs 3.0, closing the forest ambition gap. And there are three parts to this event. First, we're going to do a stock take on whether that call to action was really realized. Have countries stepped up their ambition on NDCs in forests, forests in NDCs, and we'll be hearing from Gillian about a report we're launching today on closing the forest ambition gap, looking at the role of forests in NDCs, together with Climate Focus, WWF, and Trillion Trees. Then we'll be hearing from our distinguished panelists, looking at success stories, transformational levers on forests to really see how we can build from those to leverage action. And then finally, we will really think a bit about the legacy we will get from Belém. So how do we make sure all of these discussions here are really taken forward into something more concrete beyond and to 2030, when we have our global target to halt and reverse deforestation. So yeah, I'm going to just quickly introduce our speakers, a couple of which we're still waiting on. While we do so, Gillian Gladstone is the lead consultant at Climate Focus, and we'll be talking through the findings of this report and doing some scene setting. Then I will hand over to Ruth Davis, who's the UK Special Representative for Nature and also the FCLP co-chair. Welcome, Ruth. To Irwan, what have your name on here? Irwan, sorry, your surname? Ashad. I'm very, very sorry. I'm here from the Ministry of Environment in Indonesia. We'll be talking about the role of NDCs in your NDCs. We have Dirk Nemitz, who is the Yafolu lead at the UNFCCC Secretariat. And we are also waiting on Emmanuel Montenegro Luis, who is the Secretary of Climate, Energy and Environment at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Brazil, and Achala Abesingi, who is the Director of Investment Services at the GCF. So first I'm going to hand over to Gillian, who will talk through the findings of the report and do some scene setting. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Damien, and really nice to be here with you all today. So happy to be opening this excellent panel, and I'll move quickly so we can hear from our really interesting panel today that'll get into some of the weeds on bridging this ambition gap that we have seen historically around forests. So I will start. There we go. Yeah, so I have the invitation to set the scene for this discussion on ambition in forest policy by sharing the findings of a couple recent reports that my organization, Climate Focus, has developed with partners. So I'll run through both results of progress assessment towards global forest goals reported through the Forest Declaration Assessment, and then talk about policy, both delivery and ambition in NDCs 3.0 and BTRs, and then talk really briefly about some of the activities and actions that countries, private sector, and other actors can action. So to start off, the Forest Declaration Assessment is an annual independent assessment of progress against global forest goals. We, my organization Climate Focus, and more than 30 research, academic, and civil society partners come together in a coalition to assess progress annually across the headline targets of the Glasgow Leaders Declaration, and also things like forest finance, forest governance, and trade and supply chains. So what are the headline findings from this year's assessment? How are we doing on meeting those global goals? Well, on the goal to to eliminate deforestation, we found that in 2024, we saw 8.1 million hectares of deforestation take place. And this is notable because we find ourselves halfway through this important decade, several years on from the signing of the Glasgow Leaders Declaration, and looking towards 2030, and not seeing yet significant reductions towards the 2030 goal. Of course, the sort of notable story in 2024 around forests was massive year of forest fires, which led to quite a spike in loss of humid primary tropical forests, as well as forest degradation. So overall, not a bright picture, although we do have a bright spot around restoration. So in restoration, we saw an expansion to nearly 11 million hectares under restoration globally, and that was accompanied by a massive increase in regrowth of tropical moist forests. So it's a mixed picture, but certainly still a lot to be done when it comes to really seeing results on the ground. Along with looking at the headline goals, we also look at enabling environment, and I mentioned forest finance, and I think it's just notable to say in the conversation around policy that what we see is that generally public finance is not actually aligned with forest and climate goals. So in this example, we look at harmful subsidies and incentives coming from governments, which wildly outweigh by 70-1 the amount of public international finance being spent on forests. And so that 5.9 billion figure covers ODA, REDD+, and other kinds of finance under voluntary commitments. So we know we still have misaligned incentives. I'm going to move on. We know, I think, the private finance situation has been covered a lot and in our previous panel. So in the interest of time, I want to move on and stay focused on policy. So now we turn to the report Damien mentioned, focused on the outcomes of looking at the NDCs 3.0 and inclusion of forests in climate ambition. So we looked at, for this report, 79 biannual transparency reports, the BTRs, and 54 NDCs 3.0. So on progress reported in the BTRs, we see that despite the fact that most governments signed on to a goal of eliminating deforestation by 2030 under the Glasgow Leaders Declaration, only 2 of the 79 BTRs actually include this target. So there's a clear gap here between pledges and what's actually being actioned. We also see 15% or only 12 of these BTRs include deforestation targets and report on progress on them. So on the bright side, we do see strong forest-based adaptation reporting in the BTRs, which is great, and I think we'll keep watching that. So when we turn to the NDCs and the forward-looking ambition, this is a really important tool, of course, for countries, to talk about their ambitions and their plans and how forests are being included in their climate agenda. So what we see is only 1 NDC included a commitment to zero deforestation by 2030. 7 referenced the GST mandate on halting deforestation. And only 20 set forest-related emissions targets. So unfortunately, in response to Damien's question of how have we progressed, not as much as we would like. Again, a couple of break points, 36 NDCs have quantitative restoration targets, and really important, really strong recognition of marginalized groups in these NDCs. So again, some bright threads, but overall, a big gap in the ambitions that we need to see from countries when they're talking about forests and their climate agendas. Just to note, we will update this analysis in early 2026 to capture any additional NDCs 3.0. So, we'll see. Maybe the picture will change. And I wanted to just finally mention that, we know there are a range of solutions. We've been hearing about them all week that countries, the private sector are taking to action and deliver on the ground. So the policy reports and this policy planning tools don't cover all of what's happening, which is why the Forest Declaration Assessment Partners have over the last year been driving forward something called the 2030 Global Forest Vision, priority actions for different stakeholders, governments and private sector, finance sector, to think about how they can take urgent action to meet these 2030 goals, be back on track. And I wanted to just note we have a bunch of priorities outlined for governments that relate directly to these policy discussions. I won't run through them here, but I think it's really important to note that, particularly on the finance side, the finance calls to action align very, very closely with the FCLP Forest Finance Roadmap that was published earlier this fall. And so we have great consensus between governments and civil society on what needs to happen, and now we need to see some of that action take place. I'll pause there and then turn to our panel.
Well, thank you so much, Gillian, for doing that and running us through scene setting. Yeah, wonderful. And so progress, but not enough. I think that's all about what we need to do to close the ambition gap. So now I'd like to call our panelists to take the seat. So Ruth, Irwan, Dirk, and Achala. Okay. And Achala, you need to leave in about 15 minutes or so, right? No problem. Yeah, or maybe I'll come and sit over here then, if that's okay, and or I can stand up, but that's okay. So you have about 15 minutes? Okay, wonderful. So I think we will start first with Irwan and Ruth, and then we'll come to...
We just submit our NDC last week, on the last week of October. So yeah, it is delayed. It should be in February, isn't it? But we managed to finalize it on the last week. Because of first, our NDC, there is a restructuration of government in Indonesia. We changed there is a change in the government, so they have to review our NDC. Yeah, and they call it second NDC. And there are a number of improvement in our second NDC, including first we use the baseline 2019, yeah, and then also we try to incorporate the blue carbon within our NDCs, although it's still on quantitative yet, qualitative, not quantitative. And then we also introduced one hydrofluorocarbon. So the main challenge, no, it's not problem, it's challenge, because we have to, NDC is a commitment, isn't it? It's not targeting all of the sectors, but we have to deal with all of the ministries in order to produce our NDCs. And we're happy that we can submit it on the last week of, in Indonesia, the main sector for sink or for absorption is from follow sectors. Yeah. Because we don't have any other sectors to reduce the emission. It's only from follow sectors, because other sectors, as a developing nation, we still need to grow. Yeah. We need number of funds for energy, for especially agriculture. There are 280 million people that need to be fed in Indonesia, so that's why our most of the sinking will be from the follow sectors, and we are committed that we have a net sink follow in the 2030. So we will be seeing forest sector will be sinking in absorption in the 2030. That's our. We already put it in all of our national plan, and we commit to achieve that one.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone, and congratulations on managing to coordinate across the different ministries and get that on in time. Ruth, over to you next. You were one of the first countries to submit, I think, your NDC. So, yeah, what were the successes? What are the challenges been for the UK?
Hi. Thanks very much. Lovely to see everybody. Yes, I think people will be probably aware that the UK is a champion of the NDC process and very keen to make sure that we're doing things promptly and in response to the signals that we're getting from the UNFCCC process, but also a champion of ambition in NDCs. And we're very proud that our NDC remains a 1.5 degree aligned NDC with a 60% emissions reduction cut between 2019 and 2035. We try to work very hard for that to be science-based and to look at that as an economy-wide target which covers all greenhouse gases, sectors, categories. So, I think that story probably speaks for itself. And the people in this room might want to hear a little bit more about where forests sit within that. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the UK, it is a country that over a long period of time has frankly chopped down most of its trees. So it's kind of important to know and remember that that's true. It's a small country that went through a rapid industrialization process. But even before that, as the UK was developing, it used its timber resources in many ways, whether that was in building, whether it was in shipbuilding, whatever. So we've ended up in a situation where we really have a big job to do to restore the country's forests, and we have a target to increase the tree and canopy woodland cover in the UK to 16.5%, which successive governments in a consensus have been determined to do. For me, the most interesting thing about that is how you build something that means that you've got an interesting forest economy, right? That is doing lots of different things for the benefit of the country and its people, contributing to global climate change targets, but also actually really contributing to the economy and well-being of people in the country. And that requires a mixture of things that mean that we're developing commercial forestry in a way that will enable us to use more timber products in a way that we hope will then add to the overall sustainability of our economy, but also planting new forests to support people's access to nature, and very importantly, thinking about how we restore some of our natural forests to be able to provide a really wide range of benefits, including around the kinds of ecosystem services that you get from forests in the right place, protecting the watershed, helping with cooling, improving water quality. Generally, having more forests in the landscape improves the overall resilience of everything going on in that landscape, including agriculture and including the kinds of communities that we would like to build. So that's where we are. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ruth. And thanks for bringing in that economic angle and all the ecosystem services that forests provide and really bringing in that and weaving that into your NDC. That's fantastic. So, Achala, I know your time pressed. So I'll come over to you next. So You're from the GCF. What does the GCF? How are you supporting countries with NDC implementation and also more broadly helping to drive ambition on forests?
Thank you, Damien. And first of all, apologies for having to run off. The timing of this session changed, so I'm double booked. GCF, 3 ways of funding. We are a funder. We are the largest climate fund in the world. One is our project finance. The second is our readiness funding pot. The third is our project preparation facility. 3 funding pots that we use to support this very, very important sector that we are talking about today. Damien, I'm going to address your 3 questions very quickly. What we are doing now, what are we planning to do, who are the partners that we want to work with, before I make an announcement, if that's okay. 12% of our $19 billion that we have committed so far have gone to forestry and land use sector. But I hear Julian and others who are saying not enough. And 12% is $2.3 billion in climate in GCF finance. And that also brings quite a big amount of co-financing from partners. That's the project finance. But we are talking about NDCs here. That's the planning aspect. GCF has the largest technical assistance program again in the world when it comes to climate change. That's our readiness funding pot. So $1.2 billion since the GCF operationalization since 2015 to now. We have quite a number of projects dedicated to developing follow plans and also supporting the NDC preparations themselves, as well as helping countries to put together implementation plan. Before I joined GCF, I was the country director of GGGI in Papua New Guinea, and this is one of the things that we worked on, using GCF readiness funding to really think about the follow sector of Papua New Guinea and help them to also put together an implementation plan. That was NDC 2. Now, what would we like to do more? And I hear when you say this is really not enough and we need to do more. We have now also committed to working with TFFF, Tropical Forever Forest Facility, now also to help countries depending on their needs and their demands. So GCF is not really prejudging things, but we are telling the countries who are part of Tropical Forever Forest Facility to really utilize the readiness funding to fill the gaps in accessing funding from TFFF. So we are working with the team on that. GCF is about to start developing our new programming strategy from 2027 to 2030 under the 50 by 30 ambition. That's $50 billion to program by 2030. And I am very much certain forestry and land use sector is going to be at the center of our programming strategy to work with countries hand in hand. And in terms of the partners, who do we want to work with going forward, we are putting a lot of emphasis on country ownership, right? And bringing the national organizations to work with us hand in hand to really focus on putting countries in the driving seat. So we are requesting our international partners to really work with the national organizations and regional organizations to help them to be in the driving seat. We have revised our accreditation framework to bring more national entities to take that ownership. And we are also now working with countries to establish country platforms. You may have heard on Saturday we have worked 14 countries using GCF readiness funding have announced their intention to establish country platforms. These are the nationally led investment platforms to bring all investors, all stakeholders, the whole government, and other partners, including civil society organizations, to one platform to plan strategically. And the forestry and land use sector comes in there in addition to, of course, the other sectors. But again, this is a much more coordinated and a strategic approach to putting the countries in the driving seat. Now with that, if I may come to our announcement, we are very pleased to work with the WWF and the Nature Conservancy to commit $4.5 million for the preparation and design of the Climate Resilient Enduring Earth Initiative, CRE initiative.
Wonderful.
And I'm very, very pleased to mention that the GCF is a proud partner of this. We are committing $2.5 million of GCF funding to work together with WWF and TNC. And our aim is to bring a strong project to GCF for broader funding, and working with four countries, Botswana, Namibia, Guatemala, and Bolivia, to bring this project to the GCF board as soon as possible. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Well, Achala, thank you so much for coming by. Even though your time is short, let's give a round of applause. That's fantastic. You know, Enduring Earth, I think, is one of those finance mechanisms and coalitions that really is bringing money to the ground in the places that we care about. And so that's really very welcome investment. And thank you also for, you know, exploring the readiness platform, and I think, and your interest and commitment to expanding that to TFFF, which I think, you know, as we move towards implementation phase, is going to be really critical. So thank you very much for. So, Dirk, over to you next. So we heard a little bit there about some of the kind of reporting and target setting. That's kind of the mainstay of really what you do. How has the Global Stocktake really influenced ambition in your reporting and target setting agenda, for example, on AFOLU? And what difference do strong forest targets and NDCs and BTRs really make?
Thank you, Damien. It's always a bit of a challenge to speak after such great examples and country-level examples about the framework, which is more regulatory. But I do think it is important, and I may be biased on this, but I do think it's important. And what we have currently is that the Global Stocktake completed our three things that we need. One is the Warsaw Framework for REDD+, which is the only thing that is multilaterally agreed on how to work with forests, how to do the transfers, how to register, how to do it transparently, and how to implement environmental and social safeguards as well. The second bit was to include this in the Paris Agreement in Article 5 and make it permanent. It will not change. Countries know what they are dealing with. They've agreed to deal with this, and that's how things work. And finally, the Global Stocktake gives us a direction of travel. Where do we want to go? You can call it a goal, you can call it a vision, but it's committed to enhance the efforts to halting and reversing deforestation and forest degradation by 2030. So then the reporting in the BTRs and of REDD+ itself as well builds the trust and the transparency that is needed to understand what's going on and to really work together and collaborate more on making things happen. And if countries choose to report on REDD+ as well, it can potentially unlock more results-based finance. We have seen difficulties with that in the past. We have seen very, very nice signals last year, both from the GCF, which has adopted a permanent policy for REDD+ results-based finance, as well as from Article 6.4, which has created first rules on how national and policy and project-level REDD+ would work together. And coming to the NDCs, I think there's a bit of a tricky issue. On one hand, everybody would like to see forest-specific targets. On the other hand, the direction of travel is we want economy-wide NDCs so that it really covers everything and there's no loophole somewhere. So what I always say is look a bit more into the activities, what countries have put together that they want to implement. And I think that's an area where if this is formulated well and if there's a real plan and a real strategy behind, then countries can use this also to unlock finance. And maybe in my personal capacity, I would say that we are in an era where we have reduced climate finance, reduced ODA, and we have to be more efficient in that. And I think there will be more scrutiny to see how much the finance that someone has to provide is aligned with national priorities. And that's something that can be perfectly shown in NDCs and also in national adaptation plans and NB subs, etc. If these speak together, if they have a common language, I think there's a much better chance to attract finance for this. I think overall, using this framework of the Global Stocktake, of the NDCs for setting national targets, and then of the BTRs for tracking progress towards the NDCs and reporting what's going on in the country, and of the RED Plus framework to unlock results-based finance, really helps to the implementation and analysis and adjustment of where we are and make sure that everyone is on track, and that we might make good steps towards halting and reversing deforestation in the next 4 years. It's not that much time anymore. Thank you.
No, it really isn't. Thank you for underlining the time we have left, but also the importance of synergies and really trying to avoid this kind of silo mentality and really looking more economy-wide, holistic thinking. So the next round of questions really is on kind of game changers, success stories, what we have to build on. I'm going to come to Ruth first, and then I'll come to you, Erwan, if that's okay. So Ruth, you're UK is co-chair. You're co-chair of the FCLP. So what are you doing? What's the FCLP doing in order to really try and help to kind of close this forest ambition gap?
Yeah, thanks so much. And the Forest Climate Leadership Partnership, hello, but friends from FCLP in the audience there. Better make sure I get myself right, hadn't I? Otherwise I'm going to be held to account. We're the co-chairs with Guyana of the FCLP. And that partnership is I think, to our perspective, a unique and kind of valuable place for collaboration, because it does bring together forest countries from around the world, and it brings together partners who are financing with a range of people of kind of great expertise. And the core of what the FCLP is doing is in a number of kind of work strands, which I think are very practical. That's my sense of what the FCLP is doing at the moment. Is it really is quite in the nuts and bolts. So, there's the work on just trying to make sure that we're tracking the degree to which, we're actually meeting our goals that you're familiar with. There's the work that has been done during the course of the year in partnership and collaboration with our friends in Brazil on the Forest Finance Roadmap, which I commend to everyone, and I'm very grateful to the work that others in the community have done to contribute to that roadmap. I think the thing about the roadmap that I like very much is that when you go around kind of looking at other sectors and other areas about a kind of story about how you would finance their activity, it can feel very kind of confused and sort of multi-dimensional and a bit difficult to get your mind around. But actually the FCLP Forest Finance Roadmap is a pretty straightforward and coherent way of looking at things. It recognizes the need for really deep structural change in valuing nature, of innovative mechanisms like the TFFF, of making markets work for nature, of really investing in the productive economy and the bioeconomy. And then fundamentally, it recognizes the role of indigenous peoples and local communities in delivering those outcomes. So another part of what FCLB does is that it helps to convene some of the conversations that are going on around IPLC engagement, and very specifically, it's supporting the land tenure commitment and following up on the land tenure commitment, which has been such an important thing that's emerged through this COP. We're also working on a JRED coalition to just make sure that we're continuing to drive action on JRED, so important for many forest countries. And we've been doing some practical work on how you can enhance the use of sustainable timber in construction. So I think you can see what FCLP is doing is that its members set its priorities, is very focused on implementation. We work in partnership, and we try to think of ourselves as a sort of humble but nonetheless useful engine of action on forests, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. And I'm seeing a number of people here and in the audience that were actually just at the FCLP ministerial we just had earlier, and it was a really great, I think, a great event. Congratulations, and a lot of really good announcements and engagement and real action that's happening on forests. So very happy to hear that. So I'll turn to you, Erwan, now, and this, again, thinking a little bit about what's going on in Indonesia at the moment. That's a success story that we can build on, that can be one of those transformational levers that can really help to close the ambition gap.
Yeah, closing the ambition gap from Indonesia is first for the forest sectors must be address the deforestation drivers. That's the most important thing for Indonesia, and we are progressing on that. Since 2019, we can reduce the deforestation until 75%. Yeah. And also for the pit fires, wildfires, since 2019, we can reduce it until 80%. because of the collaboration and number of programs that running in the field. Yeah, for our second NDC, we're targeting that we would like to restoring like 2 million hectares of peatland. Yeah, and also reducing deforestation until 0.3 million hectares per year. This is the target from on our second NDC. And the one that I also responding to your, that we would like to working together with the local communities. There just the first in January, we try to 14 million hectares of our forests pledged to the customary laws, customary forests. And then the last one is we would like to rehabilitate 12 millions of degraded land in Indonesia. That's how Indonesian strategy to address the drivers of deforestation. That's the main things that we would like to conduct. That's the main thing that already happened in Indonesia, and also working together with this financial institution, and just in the COP that we pledged to Indonesia, pledged to working together with tropical forests forever facilities, together working with Brazil, and Congo and other countries. We would like to working together in that as a part of a global coalition tackling the forest degradation. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwan. I mean, I think that's really inspiring. You know, the action you're taking on the ground to tackle things like wildfires, but also I think just a huge kudos to the leadership of the Indonesian government in joining with TFFF, not only as one of the forest countries, but in actually being one of the anchor investors. I think that's a really, really exciting moment for us, and huge congratulations to that. A good moment to welcome you, Manuel. Thank you for joining us. So maybe if you've got time to catch up on a couple of questions, if that's okay. So the first question we asked was really more focused on Brazil's NDC. What have been the successes in closing the ambition gap from the second NDC to the third one? Also, what are some of the challenges you faced in putting together your NDC 3.0?
Hello everyone, I'm sorry I was a bit late, I was just running from another meeting, but very glad to be here to talk about this very important issue for us. And you know that the NDC process in Brazil is very thorough, and every single sector is consulted in order to get to this level of ambition that we need. And forests, of course, are a main part of this. And we are very serious, for example, on paragraphs 33 and 34 of the GST, on finding ways to implement it, because at the end of the day, we have to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. That's one of our goals. And in Brazil, as the biggest tropical forest country with the biggest hectares of tropical forests, there are a number of challenges that we face and ways in which we have to find ways to implement that, right? So in our NDC, we have forests as a main way of mitigation, in a way to reach our ambitious goals. And one of the main ways in which we deal with that is, of course, our national plans against deforestation. This was established way back then in the first Lula term in the 2000s, specifically for the Amazon. Now, recently, we already have these plans to combat deforestation for every single biome. We have seen the results. This was recently reestablished in the past 3 years, and the results are very good in every single biome in our country. We are also very keen to find ways for restoration. Is one of the pillars in terms of forests, is how do we find different ways to promote restoration in Brazil. So we have private companies, of course, finding different formulas to do that. We also have national concessions. We also we're putting forward, actually we're incentivizing carbon markets, high integrity carbon markets, to do just that. And the TFFF as a main way to conserve forests and to provide the value for standing forests, to try to address this persistent market failure, which honestly, it wasn't a possibility at this scale to find a solution for that. So that's the main goal, and we thank Indonesia very much for all the support, being a member of the steering committee, of course, in this past 2.5 years while we have been designing this, and of course by also contributing, with Brazil being the second contributor with $1 billion for that. So this is how we're trying to close this ambition gap, working together with the South-South. You know, we have the United for a Forest, already 20 countries, 20 tropical forested underdevelopment countries working together to try to raise ambition on this issue. And in terms of challenges, as you were saying, we do have different challenges, and one of the things that we have to highlight of that it can't be only command and control. Command and control is very important, but we have to work together to find ways to have the carrots as well, and the incentives. So this is mainly what Brazil is trying to do, one step at a time. Perhaps a big step now with the TFFF. Let's keep that momentum going.
No, a very, very big step with the TFFF, and I think also the, as I said at the beginning, the action agenda the presidency has been driving, I think, to really focus on action and implementation is incredibly welcome. You know, both at home and what the role you're playing here globally, I think is very, 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 very welcome indeed. So Dirk, over to you. Another question really looking at the kind of transparency and reporting. What improvements do we need to make to transparency, to reporting that can really make a transformational change for forests?
Thanks. There's always one thing I like to set right when I get the opportunity is we always hear that the Paris Agreement is not working, we're not getting anywhere, it's not where we should be, but I always advocate for a science-based and data-based approach to this. And in fact, the deadline for BTRs was the 31st December 2024, and we are only doing the reviews this year, and the countries are only getting feedback this year, and we will only see in the next BTRs that are due in December 2026 whether the feedback is taking on and whether we see improvements in the reporting, whether we see the areas of improvement being addressed, and whether we see the capacity building the countries are asking for being delivered as well, and also the resources that are needed to actually implement the NDC when we come to the tracking of NDC. So all of this is interlinked. What we also see is there is an increasingly complex landscape of forest finance. We like to talk about synergies in this process, but then I talk to a country representative and they tell me, look, if I have carbon credits here, and I have CORSIA there, I have the GCF there, I have TFFF there, I have Articles 6.2 and 6.4 and CORSIA and biodiversity credits coming on top, and how do I combine all of this? How do I make sense out of this? How do I put this into a strategy? And also noting that each of the sources is definitely insufficient. There's not one source that covers the forest completely. So the combination is necessary, but it also means there's often no rules on how to deal with different sources, and there's a lot of strain on the countries to really monitor what's going on in all of the different fora, and then make sense of it and how to put it together. And then the next step comes applying for funds, managing funds, reporting both financially and reporting on the results. So there's lots of opportunities there for forest countries, but it's also a big task to really unlock the opportunities. It also requires the capacity to make informed decisions on the use of carbon markets, because if I sell too many credits, or ITMOs as we call them, outside of my NDC, maybe I don't achieve my NDC, and then I have to look into what do I do with that in the end, right? So there's a lot of forward planning and projections and looking into what is my security margin and how do I make informed decisions on how to unlock these opportunities that go hand in hand with transferring the right to the carbon reductions. And what we have seen, therefore, and to make also some contribution to further progress towards the halting deforestation and forest degradation by 2030, is to create a facilitative forum where countries can, south to south, talk about these things. I'm not the one giving the answers, right? UNFCCC is not the one giving the answers. But we can create a forum where countries can discuss, how are you dealing with this problem? You're combining the same two funds, you're having the same issues. How are you dealing with that? In a Chatham House room where only the countries are there. And we will have a side event on this tomorrow at 11 to explain more in detail how this will work and what we're offering in the next year, and how we hopefully get countries into the capacity to unlock all the opportunities that are there so that we can make progress, both in reporting but also in implementation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dirk. And I think a great reminder, I mean, we just heard from Indonesia and Brazil and the role they're playing in in the leadership of the TFFF, which is a great example of South-South collaboration. And we actually have an event later here today. I can't remember what time it is. I think it's 4 o'clock, where we'll be looking at South-South collaboration on deforestation and conversion-free supply chains. And again, we'll be diving into some of the progress we're making in China, in Indonesia, and in Brazil. So please do come along to that one. Sorry for the quick advertisement break there. And so now over to our very last question, and one that's very close to my heart is, and it's kind of where I started. So I said one of the key asks for WWF coming into the conference was really building on all the wonderful momentum through the action agenda led by the Brazilian presidency. We really need to see some strong political outcomes for forests at COP. So we really make sure that we have a strong roadmap, leading out of Belém towards 2030 when we have this really important global target. So the question is really what needs to happen to make sure this isn't just another place where we have some nice announcements and some good talking, but we really have sustained collective action over the next 4 or 5 years to 2030. I'm going to start with you, Emmanuel, because you're part of the presidency. You have this wonderful action agenda. There are talks of forest roadmaps and what's going to happen at the end of a climate nature package. What is the presidency doing to really make sure that we keep this momentum going beyond Belém?
Thank you. I think when we talk about roadmaps, I think we all need to establish roadmaps. The tropical forested countries that deal with deforestation. Because one thing that we noticed by working with 20 other countries at United for a Forest, for example, is that we all have different challenges. There is no single roadmap to deal with deforestation in our countries. All of us will have to find a menu of solutions. All of us will have to find different ways to tackle these challenges, right? And one of the ways that we found to do, we were trying to do many different things. One of the things is the document that we approved at United for our Forests, when we have 8 different financial solutions so that we can discuss with tropical forested countries, South-South, through South-South cooperation, what part of that menu better fits your country. And I think one thing going forward, and as part of this, what we're trying to come up with here at the action agenda, is that we have to find our own ways, our own paths, our own roadmaps, right? So Brazil is trying to do that, but Brazil has been trying to do that for 30 years. We only managed this amount, of critical mass in terms of what works and what not works after trying so many different solutions. And different countries are in different stages of that, of coming up with their own paths. And I think what this action agenda the GST aim to implementation is trying to do is to provide solutions that can be shared. We're doing this afternoon, for example, with integrated fire management. Integrated fire management is an excellent solution for curbing, wildfires, for bringing wildfire resilience, which we know is a main problem for forested countries, not only tropical forests, but for every country nowadays. And no one has been able to tackle that alone. Countries with, regardless of development level, no country has been able to control this problem. So this is a solution that we're bringing forward. So I think that the way that the action agenda is established, we want to have 5-year plans, right? So if this gets picked up by the next COP, we have an opportunity to see 1 year from now where all the initiatives that are being put forward today are going to be in 12 months. And then, of course, until 2030. And I think something very interesting can come out of that, right? One step at a time.
No, great. And Lula mentioned, I think, in the Leaders Summit around the idea of a phase out fossil fuels roadmap, but also one for forests. Is that something that we're still fighting for? We think it's going to happen, or?
Yeah, I'm not able to. I don't even have those answers yet. I think this is something that is being constructed, and I think that the results, the impact of that, and the feedback from that was very positive overall. So this is being discussed, of course, but at this COP, what is going to come out by the end of this week is still something that is being, thought out.
Very good, thank you, Emmanuel. Maybe we'll just go down the line. So, Irawan, what's your reaction to that? What would a good outcome, a formal outcome, perhaps, look like for Indonesia at the end of this COP?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, for Indonesia, we come here with commitment that we would like to. This is a COP from negotiation to implementation. And then, yeah, we would like to use all of the modalities, the instrument, the article that already accepted in here back home. Yeah, that's why we will use all of the article for Indonesia, especially for the follow sectors. Otherwise, we are back again to the baseline. So that's why in our pavilion we try to having like a carbon trading mechanism, etc. Because we would like to use that incentive for Indonesian forests, most of them. Yeah, and then the last thing that to implement is how to working together with Brazil, Congo, with all of these tropical forest countries to boosting our forestry sectors. Yeah, we have to. Otherwise, we have to conduct it now. It's already too late for us. It's been, hang on, this is COP30. It's been 30 years. Yeah, it's been 30 years, and people in the field, people in the local community asking us, what are you doing for next? Yeah, so that's why we have to conduct it now. Otherwise, it's too late for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, over to you next, Dirk. What does a successful COP look like at the end for forests? What do we need to fight for in this week?
Well, I'm the lead for agriculture and forest in the UNFCCC, right? And for this year, this has been both a blessing and a curse. There was a lot of attention, and I think the whole forest community has been blessed by a lot of attention, and everybody has been very, very busy. Well, I don't want to prejudge what is the outcome of the COP, but I think we have a very, very dedicated task to whatever is the outcome. We have to take it forward, because from January onwards, much of the attention that we had in 2025 will not continue at the same level. It will be at a lower level. It will still be there, but at a lower level. I think it's the responsibility of each organization, of each country, of each one involved in forests to take the message forward and take the momentum forward, so that we keep the momentum for the 2030 idea of halting and reversing deforestation and forest degradation. And what I would also like to say, having two of the countries here that have been in REDD+ since the beginning and been very, very dedicated, very, very strong, very, very engaged, both in the negotiations and also in the reporting and in the implementation. I think we need forests where advanced countries can share their experience with less advanced countries, and we can not build from scratch every single time. The solutions will not work in every country in the same way, but I think the approach to get to the solution will. And I'm for example, very happy that we have a meeting with a Brazilian MRV team in Sao Paulo in mid-December, together with all of the Latin American countries, to engage on what are the MRV problems currently, how was it solved, and what can other countries learn from each other. And it doesn't prevent Brazil also learning from some of the other countries, right? So it's really this sharing to keep the momentum going. And I think everybody should think about how can we contribute to keep the momentum going and keep the vision of halting and reversing deforestation, forest degradation by 2030 firmly in our minds. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Dirk. And lastly, over to you, Ruth.
Thanks. I feel slightly embarrassed being last in the room, given that there's an Indonesian and a Brazilian on the panel with me. But I'll do my best. I think, as others have said, the political outcome, I don't really want to prejudge. Parties are working away very hard with the presidency to understand what that should look like. So let me leave that maybe to one side for the moment. I do want to talk about the action agenda, because I don't think I've actually ever personally seen it so coherently organized as it has been in this COP, to reflect what we needed to do through the Global Stocktake and then to move back into the NDC process. And the example that has been set by the organization of the Brazilian presidency is one that I really hope other presidencies will take up. And if they do take it up, then there will be an ongoing implementation process in the real economy that matches what's going on in the negotiations. And that is a massive step forward for the Paris Agreement regime, in my view. I wanted to take a second to say two other things. The first is that I think it's important to reflect from the UK perspective on how important the TFFF is. I want to reflect on the leadership that's been shown, the fact that the TFFF is answering an existential question which has existed for a really long time. I think others will have heard my Secretary of State, reflect on the fact that from the UK perspective, This was not a no-never decision in terms of investment, and we look forward to continuing to work very closely and to examine options going forward next year. And on the TFFF, all of those who've been involved in any way in engagement on the TFFF, we have an obligation now to redouble our efforts, I think. 2026 is obviously going to be a very, very important year. And the TFFF, I think, will be the norm-setting space for the direction of travel on forests. So I commend Indonesia, Brazil, others for their leadership on that point. My very final point is just to say, one of the reasons this is a complicated and confusing space is because it is a live economy that is exploding in front of us. The social forestry developments in Indonesia are extraordinary. The bioeconomy proposition put forward by Brazil is extraordinary. You can't control a whole economy. All you can do is attempt to try to set the direction and unlock innovation and potential. And to be able to say that with some confidence and positivity as a result of the leadership of mostly tropical forest countries is quite remarkable. So let's go away with a sense of enthusiasm from that. I think it's been really extraordinary. Well done.
Well, thank you, Ruth, and thank you for going last and ending on such an upbeat and positive note. That was a really inspiring way to finish. We're at time, so unfortunately no time for questions, but I want to thank, first of all, Gillian for, I think, a really great scene setting and bringing the results from the report and, demonstrating some of the progress that's been made since NDCs 2.0, but still that we have some way to go. And then a huge thank you to all of our panelists, to Manuel, to Irwan, to Dirk, and to Ruth, for both sharing some of the challenges, but some of particularly, I think, really focusing on the opportunities. I have to say, my first COP was Glasgow, which I thought was a really special COP when forests really came to the forefront, when we really saw some ambition around forests, both in terms of pledges and commitments and some real action. And I think to come back here and see the agenda that's been set by the Brazilian presidency, around the action agenda, not just making more commitments, but to really roll up our sleeves, coming together and to really put forward some real action on forests, around the bioeconomy, around synergies, around finance, I think is incredibly exciting. So I really hope that we have a really fruitful next week. I hope there are some formal outcomes on forests, but even regardless, I think we have a lot of really good work to build from. And wishing you all a very good COP. And thanks again. Please, a round of applause for all of our panelists.